Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're sorry to be getting started with Thursdays at the Museum from the DIA just a little bit later today. I'm Amanda Harrison, a Community Engagement Manager at the DIA. And yes, you're in the right spot. This program has moved to YouTube. We hope this will make for a more enjoyable user experience and a better broadcast overall. On YouTube, there is no need to log in unless you'd like to ask a question, and we want to encourage you to do that. If you are logged into a Gmail account already, you may automatically be signed into YouTube. If not, you can find a blue login button on the top right-hand side of your screen. Click Sign In. This will take you to the Gmail sign-in page. Use your Gmail email and password to sign in or choose Create a Gmail account. Once you've signed in, to the right of the video screen, you will see an Add a Public Comment prompt. Use this to ask your question during the live event. To make the event appear full screen, select the small square on the bottom right side of the video. These options only appear if you hover your mouse over them. In that menu, you can also choose to turn on closed captioning by selecting the CC icon. Today, Docent Chair Kathleen McBroom is acting as a one-woman show because her partner, Deb Coombs, is having a little bit of internet trouble. But luckily, we have Christine Mark, Manager of Volunteer Development, here to assist Kathleen. So it's a little bit different of a setup, but I want you to please give our hosts a warm welcome. Hi, Christine. Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Kathleen McBroom. I've been a docent down at the DIA for about 4 years, and today we are delighted to bring you DIA Essentials, or as some of us docents like to call them, our greatest hits. This is kind of a whirlwind tour where we introduce you to some of our most popular museum pieces that we have drawn from galleries throughout the museum. We will explain to you why these pieces are such crowd pleasers, and we'll also talk about why they're such important contributions to the world of art. So let's begin with one of our absolutely most favorite pieces that people ask to see all the time, and it is this wonderful self-portrait by Vincent van Gogh. And people said, this is one of his self-portraits. He painted well over 30 self-portraits during his lifetime. Why? And his famous quote about that is, "For want of a better model." And so here we have him at a relatively happy period during his life. He was living in Paris at the time, and you can come and see this wonderful self-portrait up on the second floor in our Impressionist gallery, right next to Rivera Court. And this is a lively painting. You can see that he's using vivid colors here, very rapid brush strokes up around the top of his hat. And again, that vivid yellow that he liked to use so much. Very irregular brush strokes just to kind of create a scene for him. And like I said, he was happy at this time. We know that he had his ups and downs during his life, but he's caught his vibrancy, I think, in this expression. The other nice thing about this is that his eyes, he was staring so piercingly into a mirror when he painted this. And so when you come to the gallery, his eyes seem to almost follow you as you walk around the galleries. Now, here's something you probably didn't know. This self-portrait by Van Gogh was the first painting ever by Van Gogh to enter a museum in the United States. And we're very excited to let you know that it's going to serve as a centerpiece for an upcoming exhibition that we have going on, scheduled in 1922, called Van Gogh in America. So mark your calendars. So one last thing, in his roughly 9 years as a professional artist, Van Gogh produced over 900 paintings. But we still feel so lucky to have this particular painting, as I said, a big crowd pleaser in our collection. Now, Christine, I'm going to turn it over to you if you'd like to take our next piece and tell us a little bit about this one.
Hey, Kathleen, thank you. And our Van Gogh exhibition is in 2022, and it was purchased in 1922. At the same time, this Henri Matisse was purchased. They were both purchased in New York at auction. And the Matisse purchase is credited to Wilhelm Valentiner, our director of the museum from 1924 to 1945. But he worked for the museum buying art to fill up the walls of our current building, which opened up in 1927. So anyway, let's get back to the Matisse. Here you see, it's called the window, and it's actually the size of about a window. And it is, when you see it in the museum, it looks very flat, and the colors are very bright. So, and look at that table. Does that table look like it could actually hold that plant, or would that plant slide right off and fall onto the floor? This technique he used was very new and innovative at the time, and the colors were also very new. The period was called Fauvism. In French, and this was a French artist, it meant wild beasts, and they just used wild colors and created things. You had to, the perspective, instead of being three-dimensional where you could tell where the floor ends and the wall begins, it just kind of all blurred together. And you can tell the wall begins in this painting because the lines on the floor stop and the solid wall starts. So it was a new and innovative way of painting. And it was purchased, like I said, in 1922 at the same auction as the Van Gogh we just saw. And at the time, it was considered a contemporary art piece because, as you can see, it was painted in 1916. So it was only 6 years old. And now it's in our modern galleries on the second floor. So when you come down to the museum, come and see it. It's really a treat. And it also is the first Matisse to enter a U.S. public museum. So the contemporary artists from France at the time in the 20s were starting to make their way into the United States. And we were lucky to purchase 2 of them in 1922. And I'm going to turn it back to Kathleen now.
Thank you, Christine. Christine, what is the very first thing you say when you wake up in the morning? If you
My ceiling.
Your ceiling? Well, take a look at this ceiling. This ceiling belonged to a very wealthy merchant whose name was Jacopo Barbo, and he lived in Venice. And he commissioned this wonderful piece of art from a very well-known artist at the time, Tintoretto. The name of this piece is called What Men Dream Of. And Tintoretto used figures from Roman mythology to act out what men dream of. If you look over on the right side, you can see there's a whole, just gold coins are raining down from heaven. So of course that represents wealth. Over on the other side, you can see there's some kind of a goddess and she's holding a trumpet over her shoulder. And of course that represents fame. And then if you look at the top, we see cupids, we see all sorts of goddess of love and everything. So those are the 3 things that men dream of: wealth, fame, and love. So how do you get it? Well, let's look down at the bottom of the painting. Kind of stretched all the way across, there's a very elderly gentleman. That's the god of time. His name is Horus. And way over in the left corner, he's holding an hourglass. All right. And then front and center, kind of balanced very precariously on a glass globe, we see a young man. That is the god of opportunity. His name is Kairos. And what is important is that Kairos has come down from heaven. And he's visiting Earth. Look in the background behind Kairos. You can see all of these mortal people sound asleep, just wasting their time. So what is the story of this painting? Well, if you use your time wisely and you seize opportunity when it's available, you too can achieve wealth, fame, and love, what men dream of. Now, the background of this painting is just as interesting as the contents of this painting. This painting indeed was designed for a grand palazzo on a canal in Venice. And when the Detroit Institute of Arts purchased this painting from the Italian government, it came along with 2 rules. Rule number 1, we would never sell it to anybody else. Rule number 2, that we would display it the way it was supposed to be displayed, up on the ceiling, which is very unusual. Most museums show their paintings just, it used to be on ceilings hung on regular walls. So when when Paul Cray, who was the architect of the current building that the DIA resides in, when he built the museum, he actually designed a room that would accommodate this ceiling beautiful painting. So if you come down to the DIA, don't worry, you won't have to crane your neck or lay down on the floor to see it. We have a mirror set up so that it will reflect. But this is really a spectacular painting, and you should make a point to come down and see it. And Christine, while we're talking about architectural features, why don't I turn it over to you, and you can talk a little bit about our Pewabic niche.
Okay, thank you, Kathleen. I will certainly talk about this one. This is one of my favorite places in the museum. This is called the Pewabic niche. There's actually 2 of them, and they face each other in a symmetrical pattern in the American galleries. They were installed in the original design of the museum, so you can see the date is 1927 when our current building on Woodward opened. They were designed and the tiles were created and fired by a very well-known ceramicist. Her name was Mary Chase Perry, and then later Mary Chase Perry Stratton. She was an American woman, a ceramicist, who was born in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in Hancock. And she created, along with Horace Calkins, the Pewabic pottery. If any of you have had the chance to go down on Jefferson, it is still there, and you can go in and buy the most beautiful pieces of hand-thrown pottery. And she started the business and continued on with it throughout her entire life. But as you can see here, these tiles are very shiny. They're iridescent. She was known for her iridescence, for her development of iridescent glazes. And she achieved that high iridescence by throwing kerosene into the kiln during the cooling down process. And of course, environmentally, that doesn't work out so well these days. So now it's vegetable oils are substituted, and some really nice high glaze colors are achieved. But her original recipes, I'm told, are still held and they're available, but they don't create them anymore because of environmental standards. But so these niches, what's so fun, if you think about it, they've been here since 1927, but they took a little break. There was a time in the 60s or early 70s, we're not quite sure, when the museum decided to paint all the walls white and cover them over. And maybe they were considered too folky or folk art, but they were covered over for a couple of decades, and people kind of forgot about they were there. And then in the 90s, they were uncovered again, and we can enjoy these lovely niches that we now use to display blown glass, including Tiffany blown glass. So. I was just told that we have a special guest. So Amanda, would you like to introduce our special guest?
There is an incredibly special guest joining us. We're so disappointed to not be welcoming Deb, but the special guest star has an important question. Here's Howard Rosenberg.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Howard.
Hi, Howard.
Hi, Kathleen. I just came in. Actually, I don't have much of a question as just a comment to say you guys are doing a great job of filling in for Deb, who unfortunately wasn't able to get in. So I thought I'd just kind of bump my way in here and say hello to everybody and just act as an assistant to you guys. You are doing great, though, and please continue on.
Well, let's have you do some pieces, Howard.
Well, okay, I'd be happy to do a piece.
Okay, Kathleen, I think you're up.
Okay. This is one of my favorite pieces in the entire museum. And you might recognize the artist's name. This was done by Rembrandt. And it's a very small painting. It's upstairs on the 3rd floor in our Dutch gallery, and it's only about 22 inches by 19 inches. But let's take a look what we see here. It's a very dark background, and what we see, this is the Visitation. And the Visitation is a story from the book of Luke, and in this we see 2 women who have come together. They're meeting each other, and you can just see they're hugging each other, and they're looking at each other with great tenderness. The woman over on the right is Mary, the mother of Jesus, and the woman on the left is her cousin Elizabeth, who is going to become the mother of Saint John the Baptist. And both of these cousins are now pregnant. They're coming together. And Rembrandt has bathed them in this light that we don't know where it's coming from, but it's this magic light. There are no torches. It's obviously nighttime. But look how he has just highlighted them in such a tender, intimate moment. And look at the perspective. It's almost as if we're standing in the courtyard ourselves and looking on. The other figures that we see coming down the steps over on the left, there's a very older gentleman. His name is Zacharias. He is Elizabeth's husband. He's being helped down the steps by a young boy, perhaps a servant. There's another servant over on the other side who is helping Mary take off her cloak. And it's a little bit difficult to see, but down in the bottom right-hand corner, we have Joseph leading a donkey. And that represents the long voyage that Mary took to be able to come and visit with Elizabeth. And it also represents the fact that Joseph was supporting the whole theme, the idea that Mary was going to become the mother of Jesus. We also see there's the little dog down there on the steps. And in Dutch genre paintings or religious paintings like this, dogs always represented loyalty and fidelity. Over in the bottom left-hand corner, there is a peacock and a peahen and her babies, which were a sign of the Roman goddess Juno, who was the mother of the gods and also in Christianity, a sign of Jesus. So we see this all coming together. And so not only is this a beautiful, beautiful painting, it's thought that this painting had a lot of personal meaning for Rembrandt. And it's also thought that he painted this entire painting himself. You see, Rembrandt painted this at a time, his mother had just passed away, and there's a marked resemblance between the face of Elizabeth and Rembrandt's mother. And also Rembrandt and his wife had lost a couple of babies in infancy, and his wife was pregnant again. And so here he depicts a couple other of expectant mothers. So this is a very small painting, but it's a very tender painting. And as I said, it's a very personal painting. And I'm so glad we have it in our collection. Let's see, Christine, would you like to take our next piece?
Actually, I think this is Howard's specialty.
Oh my goodness, look at that.
Yeah.
So in fact, Christine she's actually right. It is my specialty. And I'll tell you why in a second. But before I do, I just want to remind everybody that feel free to ask questions by typing in the chat box. I bet Amanda can help us out a little bit, but I think in order to do that, you have to have a Gmail account. And it's really easy to get a Gmail account. If you do, you're already signed in. So feel free to type in any questions. I'll be looking for those today instead of Christine. We're kind of reversing our roles. So here's Shakyamuni. And the reason that I am an expert is because when Kathleen and I were in class together a few years ago, Christine was our instructor, and she assigned us each a piece to do. Kathleen, what was your piece?
I had Self-Portrait 2 by Juan Miró.
Oh, see, she had the Moreau piece. That was an interesting piece with lots of symbols on it. So this was my piece that I was given. And so that's, your first girlfriend or boyfriend are always special, I guess, if you're a docent. Your first piece assigned, you're special. Shakyamuni is a very small little guy. Christine, 18 inches high, maybe? I don't know the exact thing.
Yeah,
really
between, I think between 13 and 18, no bigger than that for sure.
And he was carved in China, and he's carved out of wood. So it's really unusual to have a piece that was made around the 12th, 1300s, so 700, 900 years ago, that is still in as good shape as it is today. He is representative of Prince Siddhartha. The prince was a wealthy young man when he saw great suffering in the countryside, and so he thought that there must be a better way to live rather than the way he was living. So he left. He went out into the mountains to meditate, and he did that over 7 years. And as you can see, how his bones are popping out, he came down the mountains emaciated. And he's in a position that's not really a meditative position. He's in a more of a contemplative position because he's thinking about all the things that he's learned during those 7 years, but he's not quite yet the enlightened person that he will become. He still needs to find a middle way. But if you notice, he has the signs of the Buddha. If you look at his head, you can see surrounding his hair, he had cut his hair off and they had turned into these small little curls that never grew back. Or you can look at the top of his head and see how large enlarged his skull is. Or look at his earlobes and you can see how long and elongated. All of these and many others are the sign of the Buddha. Eventually, he becomes the Buddha. Now, when you're at the museum, you can go behind him and also see there's a little slot where you could write and put in prayers. This was a devotional piece that was in a temple for a long period of time. And so just like other places, I understand there's a wall in Israel where you can write on little pieces of paper and stick in the wall to put in prayers. There's a lot of commonality between religious paintings and religious pieces. So that's Shakyamuni as an aesthetic done in the 1200s to 1300s. Kathleen?
Thanks, Howard. Now let's go to something entirely different. Look at this painting, and there's an awful lot to look at. Here we have the wedding dance, and it was painted by Peter Bruegel. And we see a bunch of peasants, regular folk, just celebrating a wedding. Now, when I tour this piece at the museum, I always challenge our visitors to find the bride. And after a few minutes, I usually have to give them a hint, and I tell them, well, she's got bright red hair. Well, sometimes I get arguments. She can't be the bride. Her hair isn't covered. Well, she's not married yet. And then they'll say, she can't be the bride. She's wearing black. Well, you have to remember that wedding dresses in white only came into vogue after Queen Victoria got married in the early 1800s. So this woman is getting married and she is wearing her very best dress. And it's probably black because at this time, the Netherlands were under the control of Spain. Excuse me. And all the Spanish ladies of the royal court wore black. So if you're getting married and you're going to get yourself a brand new dress, this bride chose black. We don't know who her husband is for sure, but we know for sure it's not the gentleman that she's dancing with, because custom at the time forbade men and women to dance together. When we look around, we see all sorts of celebration going on. Over in the right corner, we have a gentleman playing music. It looks like he's playing some sort of like a bagpipe sort of instrument. In the back, we see people preparing food. We see several people with mugs in their hands who are drinking. We see a lot of socializing going on, and it's a very joyous, happy scene. A couple other things I'd like to point out. At this time, as I said, the Netherlands was controlled by Spain, which means it was also heavily under the control of the Roman Catholic Church. Roman Catholic Church frowned on most of these activities. They thought that a wedding was a holy sacrament. It should be a very quiet ceremony in church, not a raucous celebration like this outdoors, singing, dancing, drinking, canoodling, all sorts of things going on.
Canoodling?
Oh, canoodling.
Canoodling?
That's an artistic term, Papa.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. If you look over on the left side, about halfway up, there's a gentleman with his back to us. And he's got on a red cap and a red jacket and kind of a bandolier strap over his shoulder. There's a good chance that that is a Spanish soldier. And instead of breaking up the festivities, he seems to be rather enthusiastically joining in. So that's kind of adding insult. And then go way over on the other side, and there's a gentleman kind of right in the middle, standing there with his hands behind his back, just kind of, viewing the whole scene. There's an excellent chance that that is a self-portrait of Peter Bruegel himself. He was known as a very educated man, a very keen observer of human nature. He liked to paint regular people, enjoying regular activities, and he would often exaggerate their activities a little bit. But again, we're so lucky we have all of these paintings. There aren't that many Bruegels that still remain in the world today. I think there's only 3 in North America, actually. So again, we are so lucky to have this painting. It was recently cleaned up, and a lot of research was done on it. So if you come down to the museum, be sure to look at the signage, because it talks about all of the mysterious things that we found when our curators did some deep research into the painting. And again, it's a nice big painting, and you can just stand there and look at it forever. So let's go on to something entirely different.
Kathleen?
Yeah, Howard?
Yeah, you did answer one of the questions about, is Bruegel common in the United States, or is it rare? But the other question I have is, you see the guy standing in the front with the brown jacket on the right side? What kind of canoodling is he up to?
I'll leave that up to the viewer's imagination.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone interprets art in their own way. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next piece. Who would like to take Mashushu? Or shall I keep going?
Oh,
Wait,
was that your piece? Christine, you want to?
I'm happy to do it. I'm sorry. I was just muted for a minute. I apologize to the whole crew out there if you hear my dog barking.
I will say that this is one of my daughter's favorite pieces. She just loves it, and she loves it just like the kids do. She loves saying it.
Mashushu, well, it's so fun to say. And this is a very popular piece with our school children. We use it for guided trips. We use it for self-guided trips. We take the children in front of it. And the first thing we do is we look at it together. So I'm going to ask everybody to look at it together. What do you see? What do you notice about this animal? Does it look like an animal you've ever seen before? It's not an animal I've ever seen before. Look at the scales on his body. And if you follow his tail up to the end, there's a scorpion on the end. It's like a scorpion bite on the end of his tail. And then go down his front paws. You see lion's paws. His back feet are talons of a prey bird, like an eagle. And he has go to his head. Let's see his head. And he has a tongue coming out like a snake. So he's what we call a composite, or an imaginary animal. And he was very powerful in the ancient city of Babylon. He was on the Ishtar Gate. He was part of the gates of the ancient city of Babylon, and he was the most powerful figure on those gates. And why is that? Because he was the patron. He was the animal of the patron god Marduk. So if you see Mashushu on the gates in Babylon, you know that the god Marduk is not far away. This animal always accompanied Marduk. And Marduk protected Babylon, looked over Babylon, and enemies of Babylon would be very afraid of this animal and also of the god Marduk. So it was made about 2,500 years ago, and the current location is, like I said, it was Babylon, but the current location today is Iraq. Now, the Ishtar Gate was excavated by a German excavation team about a century ago, and most of these ceramic tiles and blocks were taken to Germany. And the Ishtar Gate is recreated in the Pergamon Museum in Berlin. And if you go to Berlin, you can go into the museum and you can see the recreation of the actual Ishtar gates. Now, how did we end up with Mishushu? Why isn't he in the gate? Well, the Germans, when they recreated it, they couldn't create it full scale because it was just too big. So they distributed some of the extra tiles. And Mishushu, this dragon, was an extra tile. And Dr. Willem Valentiner, our director, was trained in Germany, and he knew the director of the Pergamon Museum and was therefore offered this dragon. So we're very lucky to have it. And it's in the Ancient Middle East Galleries on the first floor. And it's, like I said, really super popular with all of our children. So any questions?
I don't see any questions. I missed the beginning. Somehow I got kicked out.
I saw that.
Not unusual for me. You know, I've been kicked out of a lot of
Yeah.
places. So did you say how many dragons there are outside of Germany?
No, I didn't. Do you want to share that?
I think that now I'm always forgetting. I think that there are 4.
I think there's 4 too. And there's also lions and bulls.
Right. And we have one, Istanbul has one.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 others in some other locations in the world.
Yeah, these animals are distributed internationally. They're in Sweden, they're in Germany, they're in Turkey. Many museums have the extra bulls, and there's an extinct creature also that looks like cattle, and then there's the dragon. So the Berlin Museum redistributed the extra ones to museums around the world.
Yeah, I think that it's great that shows you how much Valentiner meant to building up the DIA as a world-class museum.
Absolutely. And the very idea, too, that we have a dragon, because he was one of the most important figures on the Ishtar Gate.
We have a dragon. Well, actually, we have a few dragons, but this is one that's really particularly good.
Yeah, it is. And it's very bright in color, too. If you think about the fact that it was fired, 2,500 years ago, it would have been in a kiln, but it would have been a mound kiln. Mary Chase Perry Stratton, she had like a electric kiln like we're familiar with today. But this dragon would have been fired in a mound kiln in the earth, in the ground.
Okay, that was it. And I don't see any other questions.
Okay. And we're going on to Eleonora. So here we have Eleonora of Toledo and her son Giovanni, who was her second son. This was painted around the mid 1500s when she was married to Cosimo I de' Medici in Tuscany. And she, if you take a look at her, was a very powerful woman. And what do we see about her that just tells us of her power and her wealth? We'll take a look. See the pearls? What about those pearls?
Oh, I'd kill for those pearls.
They're huge, aren't they? She has pearls all the way around her neck. And it's said that she was given those pearls as a wedding gift by Cosimo's mother, and she wore them often. Now
that's
look
one
at how,
good mother-in-law.
That's absolutely right. Well, she was an important catch for Cosimo. Her father worked for Charles I, and he was the viceroy in Naples, and she came with a big dowry. And she also came with protection, military protection. So Cosimo was able to unify Tuscany and create a unified Tuscany from all the little city-states in Italy, all the way from Florence, all the way down to Siena. He unified all that entire area. And it was with the backup and the help of Eleonora. She was quite a lady. She was educated at a time when women often didn't, know a lot about the world. She knew how to read and write, and she read ancient Greek philosophy, and she established workshops for both ceramics and also fabrics and tapestries. And just take a look at her dress. That dress, if you come to the museum and look at it, it is sumptuous. It is full of satin and silk and fuzzy black brocade. That's all embroidered on there also. And then if you look at her chest, it looks like, what is that? It's hard to tell. That's a pomegranate flower. And what is the symbolism of a pomegranate flower? It's pomegranates, if you cut them open, they're just full of little seeds. So this is the symbol of her fertility, that not only is she powerful and wealthy and healthy, as you can see by her pink cheeks, but she's fertile. And she did go on to have 11 children with Cosimo. Marriages then were often arranged, but she and Cosimo really had a love for each other, and they had a very happy and prosperous marriage. And little Giovanni here is like I said, her second son. This portrait exists in more than one place. It's a multiple, meaning the Bronzino painted it more than once. Ours has a very dark background. It originally was blue, but Bronzino didn't use lapis lazuli. He didn't use expensive blue, so the blue turned brown, and that happens a lot when artists use minerals and pigments that change color over centuries. But there is another one of these that has a blue background, and these were sent out as an advertisement. They were military propaganda. They were social propaganda. They were sent out, this was before television and all social media we have today. So when people would see this might be the only picture or the only visual they had of Eleonora. So these were sent out as military, basically military propaganda. And we're lucky to have it. It's a beautiful piece. It's really large, and it's in the Italian gallery that's dedicated to the Medici dynasty. And there was over 300 years of art. There's a lot of beautiful pieces in there. So I suggest you take a stop in there when you come to the museum. Any questions?
There are no questions, but there's
no questions. Okay.
No questions, but there's some comments about how beautiful the dress is.
It is very beautiful.
People would love to have that dress.
And there is actually a YouTube video, and you can watch a scholar do a 45-minute presentation on the creation of the fabric for this dress, which took over 2 years. And so it was a special dress, very expensive. Okay, so the next one we have is Watson and the Shark. And this was done in 1782. We're changing continents even. We're now in the Atlantic Ocean. We're near Cuba. This is also a popular piece with our visitors and our school children. And what was going on in the 1700s? Well, the American colonies were establishing themselves. The American colonists in 1782, we're talking about the American Revolution, but this event actually happened 30 years before that. So think about, the mid 1700s. The people who lived in the colonies thought of themselves as British. They thought of themselves as British colonists. And the figures in this painting worked on merchant ships. Those merchant ships would have carried goods, materials, and enslaved people back and forth between the colonies and in England or Europe. So this ship happened to stop in Cuba. Notice the guy in the water. The kids sometimes think that's a woman because of the long hair, but it was the style then for men to grow their hair. If you take a really good look at him, what is adjacent to him? What is the closest thing to him in the water? A big shark. And what is this shark up to? Well, this guy's name is Brooke Watson. He was 14 years old at the time. He was working on a merchant ship which stopped in the warm waters of the Caribbean, and he wanted to go swimming. He was warned not to. He was told that the waters were shark infested, and he took off his clothes and he jumped in anyway. Well, he summoned the sharks, and you can see there's one on him, there's one circling behind, and he was actually attacked. He lost part of his right leg, but then you can see the people in the rowboat, and they saved him. They took him up on the boat. This is a true story. And they took him back to Boston where he was fitted, and he survived, and he was fitted with a leg. So he was able to, move about on his own, and he recovered. He then moved after the American Revolution, or during the American Revolution. He moved to London. He decided that he wanted to be British and not American. And he went on to become the Lord Mayor of London. Very important role. He was also a very important merchant in his lifetime. And he attained enough money to have the most famous painter of the time, John Singleton Copley, paint this painting. And he not only did it once, he did it 3 times. So there's one, we have one, there's one in Washington, and then there's one somewhere else, Washington, D.C., and then there's another one. You guys can remind me. I don't remember where the third one is. Anyway, ours is the only vertical one, and it's thought that maybe it was the first one. It's not that big. It's maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, Kathleen? Does that sound right? Or 3 feet by 4 feet? How does that sound? It's around that. That sounds around. Yeah. And and Copley, what he did here is he painted everyday people as heroes. So this is really new and different. It's innovative because normally painters of this time, they were painting landscapes, they were painting historical figures, they were painting important generals, and this is an everyday hero, and this scene is everyday life, and so that makes it really, really innovative for the 1700s. Any questions?
The other one is in Massachusetts, in Boston.
In Boston, okay.
Yeah.
So they're all in America.
Right, and there's a godzillion pieces by Copley in Boston. He was from Boston.
That's right. Yeah, he was originally from Boston.
Now,
and
Christine,
the elite. Howard,
wasn't this ours done in order to create the right size for printmakers to make prints so they could have a lot of them sold out for people wanted to buy them like they do now with posters?
Yeah, our curator, Ken Myers, does talk about that from time to time when we're in the galleries with him. Mm-hmm. And I see a comment in the chat box, laugh out loud, we all go nude swimming, right? Yeah. Any other questions?
No, I don't see any other questions.
No? Okay,
No.
I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen then.
Shh, you guys, keep it down. Shh, look at how dramatic this piece is. Look at how we are looking at what is going on here. Obviously, we've been allowed to enter into a scene at a moment of a lot of intensity here. So what do we see? We see a woman. She's protecting her face from the light of that small candle. She's looking off. I mean, obviously she's afraid of being seen. Look at how the light from her hand kind of leads us right down over to her right arm that is extending down across her body. And what is she holding? Is that a sword? Look at how that the very distinctive yellow of her dress and it comes down onto the face of the other woman. And when we follow her arm down to the bottom, what is that at the bottom of the painting? Well, to me, it looks like a severed head. What is going on here? This incredibly dramatic scene tells the story of Judith and her maidservant, Abra, and the head of Holofernes. And this is a story from the Apocrypha, and paintings such as this were used to teach a largely illiterate population stories from the Bible and to increase their understanding of the Catholic Church. And this type of painting is called Baroque. This is an excellent example of Baroque painting, where lighting and stance and color and theme were all brought in to create a sense of drama. I mean, if you look up at the top at the right, there's that red velvet drape that even looks like the curtain, perhaps like it's been pulled back on the curtain of a play or something. So what was the story that this painting was trying to convey? Well, Judith was the widow of a king of a very small Jewish settlement. And Holofernes was a mighty Assyrian general. The Assyrians were known for being very, very territorial. So when Holofernes and his huge armies approached this small Jewish settlement, Judith knew that there was no way that they could possibly stand up to them. So what she did instead, she used her intelligence. And she got her handmaiden, Abra, to come with her. And they wined and dined. They got into Holofernes' tent and they wined and dined him. And once Holofernes got sleepy and kind of drunk, they cut his head off. Then they spirited his head out of the camp. They took it back to the Jewish encampment. They put the head up on the ramparts. The next morning, when the Assyrian troops woke up, first of all, what had happened to their general and what was his head doing up on the ramparts? They were terrified. What magic had allowed this to happen? So the troops dispersed and Judith was hailed as the savior of her people. Now, as remarkable of that story is, there's one more thing that's even more remarkable about this painting, and that is the artist who created this, Artemisia Gentileschi, a woman. And women artists were not unheard of in 17th century Italy, but they were pretty few and far between. And Artemisia had been trained by her father, Orazio. She obviously had incredible skill and talent. And eventually, even though women could not attend art school and they could not usually join guilds and they could not display their artwork in public, Artemisia, through her sheer talent, became known. And she was the first woman to allow to join a guild of artists and painters. She used to get papal commissions. She eventually wound up being a court painter for the King of England. And so she went on, and she was a very astute businesswoman, and she was a very talented woman, as we can see here. And she painted this scene other times throughout her life. And her other scenes progressively got more and more gory. But this one, I think, is just, it's literally a showstopper. And by that, I mean, if I'm down at the museum and I have a tour group and I walk by this painting and I don't stop and talk about it, I lose half my tour group. So this is a show-stopping, and it is the oldest painting that the DIA owns that we know for sure was painted by a woman. So this piece is remarkable for many, many reasons. And now let's go to another piece, though, that is kind of the antithesis this. And here we have...
Hey, Kathleen, before you move on.
Yeah.
There was a question about Judith and her maidservant being painted by other artists, and do we have another one hanging in the museum?
Oh, yes. The story of Judith was a pretty popular story, and probably the most famous other representation we have is one by another Renaissance painter whose name was Titian. And something about the way that Artemisia chose to display Judith and Abra, other artists throughout history had, taken on this subject matter. And often Abra was shown as an old lady, an old crone, maybe like even Judith's old nurse or something like that. Here we see Abra as a young, vibrant woman, the sort of person I would take with me if I was going to infiltrate the enemy camp, for sure. The other thing is that in some other representations created by men, Judith herself is sometimes kind of shown as a wanton woman with her dress over her shoulders, or kind of a seductress. Here we see her as an intelligent woman, fully dressed, intent on a plan that worked out and saved her people. So again, it's kind of a unique presentation. Are there any other questions, Christine?
No, there was just a comment that we also have a bronze of Judith in the Renaissance galleries, because she was the patron protector of the city of Florence, or still is, I think. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now here we go to something that's a little bit different. Here we have two young girls, innocent. They're sitting in the glade outdoors, back to nature. We can see the tender regard they have for each other. They may be sisters, they may be good friends, but it's just such an innocent setting. And a lot of people will probably know this piece as the Nut Gatherers. But actually, that's not the correct name. The correct name is the Hazelnuts. We just found this out recently. And why is it called the Hazelnuts? Well, look at the girl on the right and look at her cupped hands. In there, she has actually been gathering up hazelnuts. So that's what we have. And this beautiful painting of childhood innocence was painted by William Adolphe Bouguereau, who was an artist. He was a teacher at the French Academy, and he painted scenes like this of childhood innocence. These young girls have no idea what kind of problems they'll be facing in the future. They're still kind of captured. He used a very simple palette. There's only a little bit of pop of red. You can see the blonde girl is wearing the red hairband, and then the other girl has just that tiny little bit of red piping around her dress. So anyways, this is a very sweet painting compared to that powerful painting we just looked by Artemisia. So if we move on now, yikes, Howard, take it away.
Oh, you're giving me this?
Yeah.
Oh, sure, now. Okay, well, Kathleen, what strikes you on this picture most? What pick the one thing that strikes you the
Everything.
most?
I think the little creature sitting on her belly.
So let me ask you two ladies this. Isn't this exactly how you guys sleep at night, like this?
Not normally.
Your arms thrown over your head,
Oh,
your head leaning back. You know, you got a whole thing going on there. So this is The Nightmare, done in 1781 by Henry Fuseli. He was Swiss. And what's going on here? You got this little strange, evil-looking man. Behind him is a horse or a mare or donkey staring very evilly at you, and a woman who's enthralled, who is just out of control and behind herself. You know, whose nightmare is this? Is this her nightmare, or is this Fuseli's nightmare over something that he's worried about? So the interpretation of this is that Fuseli was engaged to be married to a woman who, for one reason or another, left him and didn't have him, and that this might be his way of getting back at her. He painted her with an incubus. An incubus is this sexual fiend that comes to women at night and causes them to engage in impure thoughts and impure actions. And that's why women were not allowed to sleep alone, that they had to be with somebody else because they were scared that they might actually engage in some behavior that they might enjoy. So he paints this incubus with this mare behind him and creates this scene that absolutely everybody loved. I mean, this is a painting that people just came from miles to see. One of the things that Fuseli knew was he knew the Shelley family. That would be Mary Shelley who wrote Frankenstein. And there might have been some, kind of relationship there where they were inspired by this thinking. Now, the other thing is that on the opposite side of this painting, he painted, oh, there it is. So this is the back of the painting where he had actually painted, Kathleen, you remember the woman's name?
Not right off, no.
Anybody remember the woman's
Anna.
name?
Her name
Anybody
is
out there
Anna.
remember the woman's name?
Anna.
Anna. So Anna was his love of his life, and he painted her, but then he painted her out, and he created the nightmare. So he went from, the love of his life and the dream, his heavenly dream, and even look at the frame, how it's cut out to hold her bee-bonnet hair style, to the nightmare where the incubus is ravaging her. I see there's a comment that somebody would like hair like that. I would like hair like that too. So who wouldn't? So this nightmare is one of the most requested pieces to be loaned out by the museum, by other museums in the world. I mean, we have a few of them. Obviously, the blue, is it the Blue Lady by Picasso? What is
Melancholy Lady?
Melancholy Lady by Picasso. Yeah. Artemisia is asked for a lot, and this is one of the most asked for pieces. So there you have the nightmare and Anna.
And Howard, I think when we did loan this out, we loaned it out to France twice. Once it was in an exhibition at the Louvre, and it was the banner on the front of the building.
That's very cool. Would you?
We loaned it out also to the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. So we've sent it to Paris a couple times.
Well, we just got back the busts of Franklin, right? And Washington. So that was a good return. Those were beautiful busts to see.
Yeah, that's a nice point to make. The DIA, being a high-class, top-notch international museum, we loan out a lot of really important pieces because we hope that they'll reciprocate. And we receive very important, wonderful pieces of artwork from museums around the world that we can then share with visitors in Detroit. So that's something that museums do. We share with each other, and the collections committee, the curatorial staff, our director, Salvador Solor Pons, they all get together and talk about what they would like to borrow and what they're willing to lend. And so this one goes out pretty frequently.
For example, like the Van Gogh show coming up or the Artemisia show coming up.
Yeah, that's right. We forgot to mention that there is an Artemisia Gentileschi show coming up. There is. We're going to have some great exhibitions for all of you to come and visit. Kathleen, we'll turn it over to you as it's 2:00.
It is 2:00, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the pieces that we've hit. We hope that we have tweaked your curiosity and that you'll be ready to come down. The DIA is open for visitors. You can come down. We're following all sorts of safety protocols. We're doing everything we can to keep you all safe. You can go right on the DIA website, dia.org, and make reservations. I really recommend that you do that. We're open Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock, and Saturdays and Sundays from 10 to 5. And in addition to these wonderful, superstars that we've shared with you today, we have some special exhibitions that are taking place right now. We have Detroit Style, which is car design in the Motor City from 1950 to 2000. And that is worth coming down to see, just to try to figure out how we managed to get 3 cars up onto the 2nd floor of the museum. We also have an exhibition that kind of goes along with it. It's Russ Marshall Detroit photographs for roughly the same time period, 1958 to 2008. And then there's another small but wonderful, powerful exhibition called Experience and Expression, which considers abstraction, experimentation, definition. Basically, it allows people to to express themselves. All sorts of artists, primarily works that have been acquired by the museum in the last 10 years or so. Make sure you join us next week. Our next Thursday at the Museum presentation is going to be a live concert. It's going to feature Elvin Waddles. So hopefully we'll see you all next week. And so Christine, thank you. Howard, thank you. Everyone coming to my rescue at the last minute. Deb, I'm so sorry you couldn't join us. Hopefully you'll be back with us soon. For everybody else, take care, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye for now.